Let's do a little business before we start today. Hey, we talked about Roadie Sport on the last show. Roadie Sport, run by Justin Roadie, founder. He was a professional shot putter and 2012 Olympian. They offer personal training. They offer throws training. They offer some really smooth products like the shot put glove for you guys that are throwing heavy shots and stones. I highly recommend the shot put glove to keep those fingers and hands from snapping on you. Check him out. Really cool items. He also makes really nice closed loop lifting straps, leather lifting straps. They're some of the best I've ever seen and used. I highly recommend those as well. You got to check them out. He's also promoting the Jolly Big Throws Clinic on December 21st at Youngstown State University for you throwers out there. He's bringing in some of the best coaches in the country to do some coaching that day at Youngstown State. It's kind of a meet and greet, learn by doing. You're going to get some throwing in. You're going to get a lot of coaching. And you get a swag bag with early registration at Roadiesport, RODHESPORT.com through October 31st. Use the code SAVAGESPORT, all one word, all capitalized, for 20% off products and lectures at Roadiesport.com. Get on it. All right, Cerberus Strength. Cerberus Strength. We've been talking about Cerberus Strength forever, and I am really psyched that people are starting to use the code and starting to dig the products, and you're finally listening. Get on these guys. Cerberus Strength has everything you need for your strength journey. Wraps, straps, knee sleeves, elbow sleeves. Their knee sleeves are awesome. Tell you right now, their sleeves for the knees and elbows, wrist wraps are awesome. Check them out. They also have smelling salts and tacky, everything you could possibly need. Cerberus-strength.us. Use the code REFINESAVAGE10 at checkout, 10% off. Warrior CBD Official. Warrior CBD is the best CBD maker in the business. You see people all over the place promoting shitty CBD products. I said it, they're shitty. You got to check out Warrior. Warrior has the best CBD on the market. I've used it. I love it. My personal opinion, just good stuff, man. You can get a hold of Nancy on their Instagram page at Warrior CBD, or you can go to the website, warriorcbdofficial.com. Use the code WARRIOR20 off at checkout. Check out the Warrior CBD for pets. For those of you who have psycho dogs who get freaked out by thunderstorms, I promise you, this stuff works like magic. For those of you who just have some anxiety, problems sleeping, aches and pains, give it a shot, man. You're going to love the products. Warrior CBD Official. Viking Coffee, the best coffee on the market. Evan Armstrong got a hold of me last week, said sales are way up, especially in the Old Man Strength coffee. I love it. I made it. I didn't make it, but I taste tested it and picked it out along with my wife and Aaron Varga here at the gym. We picked it out and we love it. And Evan turned it into our Old Man Strength brew coffee. It is fantastic, but he's got loads and loads of different flavors of coffee to try, and I suggest you try all of them. Give them a shout. VikingCoffeeCode.com. Store-bought coffee is shit. Use the code VikingCoffee10 at checkout for 10% off. Serious Steel. The folks at Serious Steel have got your back. They've got everything you need for your strength journey. If you're outfitting some kind of gym, if you're just looking for equipment and you're shopping around, go to Serious Steel and check out the prices, and also use the code SAVAGE for 10% off. They have everything you need that you can get from all these other stores. It's just a better run company with nice people and customer service that is out of this world. Check them out, SeriousSteel.com. Stay Classy Meats is the best. They're the best. There's a lot of meat companies out there selling you stuff. Stay Classy Meats is the best. I love them. I am so psyched. My box is on its way. I got a shipping notice today that it had shipped out, and I could not be happier. I'm going to restock my refrigerator with Stay Classy Meats, and I am fueled 100% by God-loving American meat products, and I will be ripping through this box like I've ripped through the other two they've sent me. I can't wait to see what's inside. I do the executive box, and I let them pick what's in there, so I never know what I'm getting. I have not been disappointed yet. StayClassyMeats.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout for 10% off. Check out the Build Your Own box. If you have any questions, give me a holler. I'll help you with suggestions for that box. Iron and Stone Strength. Iron and Stone. They're doing it right up there outside of Buffalo, New York. They are getting ready to have a big competition up there in December. That is their Feats of Strength competition. Check them out, man. They run a good show, and their products are out of this world. You got to check out their shirts, man. I love the t-shirts. They are a cool-looking logo that you don't mind wearing out in public. IronandStoneStrength.com and use the code REFINED SAVAGE at checkout for 20% off. Today on the show, we have one of my new favorite humans. The great part about doing this show is you get to meet people and they become favorites of yours. And this guy, I went into this interview completely blind on a recommendation from David Sloan to check this guy out while you're in Key West. And I had no idea. I had no information on this guy at all. We sat down at a rum bar on Duval Street. So you're going to hear people walking by. You're going to hear cars driving by because we were right out on an outdoor patio outside the rum bar. It was a fun interview. And this guy is incredibly interesting. He's lived an amazing life at a young age. And he is what you call a Key West true conch, man. This guy is living the life. Check this interview out. I promise you won't be disappointed. You're going to be as amazed as I was. Share it with your friends, motherfuckers. See you at the end. Quincy Perkins.
Yeah.
We are at the Rum Bar on Duval Street. So when you hear all this background music, this is Duval Street in Key West. So
that's right.
That's just the way it works. So,
yeah.
Good to finally meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me on this.
You were recommended to me when I've got David Sloan on the podcast tomorrow. And as soon as I got done walking him up for the podcast, he said, you got to get hold of my friend Quincy and get him on the show.
Yeah.
And I had to do some quick research on you and find your Facebook page and look at all the stuff you were doing. But so you were a photographer for National Geographic, you were saying?
I was actually, so the story begins when I graduated from college. I was a linguistics major. Nothing to do with film or anything like that. I studied Spanish and Old Spanish and sort of the Romance languages, and I graduated in 2002 from college right after 9/11. And if you were a linguistics major coming out of a college in the Northeast, the State Department was right on your butt. I mean, they were headhunting us, and so they wanted people that, you know, basically they were going to pay you six figures to learn Arabic and start coding.
Right.
And so I went to DC on the request of my parents, mainly to get a good job with the State Department. And I was living in DC for a few weeks and underwent sort of psychological training with State Department and other things. And while I was living there, a friend of mine said, you know, the Nat Geo offices are like down the street. And I was like, oh, right, like they'd hire me. And he was like, well, you know, you got a good degree in here. And, you know, go see. And I actually know someone that works there. She's a secretary, but she might be able to help you out. So I went over and met with her. And I literally walked through, like signed in the books, walked up to the 10th floor where she was at. And the Nat Geo offices there are like, you know, historic, gorgeous things. And I was just kind of like amazed. And
you're more impressed by the Nat Geo office than the DC.
Yeah, the office was just like amazing. And so I walked up to her, and I knew she was probably a secretary for someone fairly important there because she had a nice desk, and she was kind of right at the front there. And I walked up and was talking with her, and this woman walked out and kind of cut right in front of me rudely, sort of like, hey, I need you to do this and that, get this, and blah, 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 and took up, like, and I was just kind of standing there. And she turned, and she was like, I'm sorry, did I interrupt? And I was like, yeah. I was like, it's okay, though. And she was like, do you work here? And I was like, oh, no. And she's like, hi, I'm Lisa De La Rue. Well, I had done some research previously to going in there. Like, research is sort of the name of my game, and you know, it's such an important part of life, I think.
Sure.
And to be prepared and for anything.
Yeah.
And this was a job thing, maybe, possibly. Well, Lisa De La Rue was the managing editor of Nat Geo, the entire magazine at the time.
Wow.
She was the head honcho. And so we started talking, and she was like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, oh, I'm actually here to, like, get a job. And
so now she basically owes you one because she's getting rude.
Yeah, right? And she was like really it was kind of funny, and she was talking with me, and she said, well, you know, what do you do? And I said, well, I just graduated linguistics major and stuff like that. And she's like, oh, and you want to get a job? And she's like, you any interested in line producing? And I was like, oh yeah, had no idea what that was. But I was like, yeah, line producing. I'd love to do line producing. And she's like, well, let me put you in touch. She like literally walked me down to this guy's office in HR and was like, get this guy a job.
Wow.
And the guy was like, can you go down to Columbia in a couple weeks? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, line producing, right? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, do you know what that is? And I was like, not really. I was like, I can guess, you know, and I was way off.
Right.
But basically, line producing was they would give you what were like basically cheat sheets. There were stories, ideas that they had. They'd fly you into a town, and you would go out and make all the contacts. And so you, like, you know, it was all like frogs and snakes for a couple of years.
Right.
As they worked me up, I got into some of the bigger stories, but it was a really interesting process because I went down there and immediately they knew I speak fluent Spanish and I'm so good at it that I kind of speak different dialects and I know slang and stuff like that. So they were they were interested in what I could do down there in different capacities.
Yeah.
And Nat Geo at the time, this was 2002, was sort of changing tones. They were going from less frogs and snakes, as they would say, into more like hard-hitting news stories and a lot of undercover government work. They were getting into kind of the underbelly of like gang life and prisons, and I mean they were really going out there because people, the subscription base was dropping. And so in order to pull in new subscribers, they really had to do interesting, hard-cutting stuff. And so line producing was basically, they'd send me into a town, I'd have to figure out who the scientists were that were studying this frog or snake, where the locations were, I'd write all that stuff down, and then they'd send down the people that made the real money, like the photographers and writers and Nat Geo.
You were the recon.
I was recon, exactly. And so I would set up, basically get in, set up interview times with these people, everything, and then they would literally fly in, and sometimes it would be at the airport, like I'd meet them right outside, I'd exchange notes. And this was kind of like email was around and internet was becoming sort of a thing, but it was still all kind of done by paper. So I started doing that, and then they started putting me like almost immediately into these other jobs, but they flew me back to DC, and I started undergoing like a lot of training with like DEA agent, like ex-DEA. I went through training. There was a CIA member. It was kind of like joint task consultants that then formed a group that were hired by Nat Geo to train people to go into like dangerous zones.
Oh wow, yeah.
And then I got special permission through the embassy to get go into red zones and stuff like that. So I was going into like where FARC was.
Right. Was it basically like situational awareness, how not to be a target,
exactly.
That kind of stuff?
Yeah, big time. And as a sort of white guy, speaking, that was a high priority target for especially narco trafficking down there. It was a big. And there was just, there was the Shining Path, which used to be a political group.
I remember that.
In the 80s that had done a lot. They sort of bombed the shit out of Peru in order to get a seat on the government. And the government was like, you're not doing this. And so then they kind of turned to narco trafficking in order to survive. And it was once a sort of philosophical group that has now turned into just straight up narco trafficking.
Right.
And they're the nasty ones. Like FARC is more sort of the planters and they sort of have the distribution points, but the kind of on the ground guys, the guys that would like ambush like money vehicles, like these armored vehicles, and then just shoot the fuck out of them.
Yeah. No, you're totally
okay. All right. I don't know if I could. Okay.
We have an NC-17 radio.
Okay,
we're good to go.
Okay, good. So these were just nasty guys, and so Nat Geo, because insurance and all, they didn't want to obviously lose me, and the big thing was just not to get captured too, because that's the real problem. The embassy does not take kindly to Americans going into these areas, because then it makes just all sorts of problems for the government.
Sure.
So we went under a lot of training, and it was sort of continual training. Like I would go down there and would get emails of reports to read and things that would tips. They were also, I was working hand in hand with the FBI and the NCIC, which is sort of the missing persons database. And because I was going into areas where there are a lot of expats and I was talking with a lot of people, they would occasionally like use Nat Geo. Like, I would just come across people. Like there was this is a super long story, but just sort of the elevator pitch of it.
Nothing but time.
Is that there was a guy named Robert Vesco who was well known in the 70s, who was sort of like a Wall Street billionaire, and he sort of was into sex trafficking in South America, and he had been through Costa Rica but was exiled from there. And long story short, but I ended up sort of meeting people from his group down there inadvertently.
Yeah.
And because I was aware that these were wanted people, and we had to be sort of aware of where different groups were, that a lot of times, we were kind of like informants for FBI stuff,
it's like spy
nuts.
shit.
Yeah, it was nuts. And I never carried a gun or anything like that, but I certainly should have.
Right.
Like there were definitely times I was like, in fact, some of the places that were the least dangerous, quote unquote, were like the most dangerous for me.
Was there times when you were a little freaked out that something was going to go wrong?
Yeah, so in fact, I ended up working 6.5 years with Nat Geo, and everything was sort of, there were some sticky situations, but for the most part, like nothing,
Right.
Nothing really that bad.
I was talking to John Holster, who's the bartender at the Chart Room last night on the podcast.
I know John, yeah.
He just came back from Colombia himself, and you hear Colombia, and it was funny because we were sitting in the bar last night, and all these people came in. Hey, how was your trip? You survived.
Yeah.
And my wife and I had been watching a special. I think it was an old Anthony Bourdain special when they were down there.
Yeah.
And you always hear about all Colombia and how dangerous it is, or all these South American countries. And then we started looking up statistics.
Right.
And we live near Cleveland. Per capita, Cleveland was a lot more dangerous than Cartagena was.
Yeah, and it's really just knowing like the areas. So like, Miami, there's areas of Miami that are pretty dangerous at certain times of the day. And it's the same like even, Lima, Peru can be nasty. There were definitely some times where like they would send me some stuff, and towards the end of my working with Nat Geo, they eventually sent me to the Galapagos Islands because I'd done such the kind of dirty work, quote unquote, for a while that I was like, can you guys set me up with something nice?
Can I go watch them swimming in Guana?
That's exactly what it was. And they were like, where would you like to go? And I was like, the Galapagos would be great. Plus there was this cute Ecuadorian girl at the time that I wanted to
always helps, right?
Go after. But yeah, it wasn't really until we ended up shooting the documentary, then we got into some nasty stuff. So
which documentary was this?
So this is called The Little Fireman. It's out on Amazon right now.
Is that the kids on the go-karts?
Exactly.
Okay, I was to see how.
Yeah. So this
I got to know you too late, so I haven't got to see anything yet.
Yeah. So this story is basically, it comes out of my Nat Geo work, but it was I was at a dinner with some Rotarians in Lima, Peru. They were working on like clean water access for communities, education for single mothers. Like they were basically doing all these Rotarian type things. And they had, and I was doing a series of stories about these groups in Lima that were doing sort of aquaponic planting for like really poor communities, like figuring out how to grow, small gardens in deserts. So I met them through that. I was at this dinner, and this guy said, "Oh, you're a filmmaker." Okay, well, let me scoot back here. The internet was becoming a thing back in 2002, 2003, and because I was going into these really interesting places, they said to me, "We're going to send you down a Sony PD-150. These are the old like little tape cameras.
Okay.
And just shoot some stuff while you're down there, and we can put it up on our website."
I'm sure
it's like Web 1.0.
Brilliant footage.
Horrible stuff.
Right.
But before I knew it, I had done like in 1 year 100 short documentaries. Like I was just pumping them out. So by de facto, I became like a filmmaker. Because and then I started studying like editing and documentarians.
Sure.
And I was watching films and keeping a close eye on, and sort of came into filmmaking that way just by force.
Kind of the way people who do that with YouTube now are doing it.
Exactly. And it was the exact same thing. And I was editing on a little laptop, and it was a mess. But that stuff was getting published, and people were liking it, and that was kind of like a feel-good thing. And I was like, because I wasn't a writer, so it was like this was kind of my main stamp on Nat Geo after a while. And so anyway, I was doing filmmaking. So by the time I met these Rotarians in Lima, and this is in 2007 that I meet them, the guy says, "Oh, you're a filmmaker, here's an interesting story." And I was like, rolled my eyes. I'm like, I've heard that a million times. And he started to tell the story about this group of young boys that live 16,000 feet up in the Andes Mountains who save lives on go-karts. And I went, what? and he said they live in a active terror zone and narco trafficking, and because it's too dangerous for firemen and policemen to go in there, these young kids between the ages of 8 and 18 years old pretend to be firemen and policemen in order to earn a living. Like they're basically first responders. So anything that goes bad, there's like a couple clinics on the road, and those have like been bombed out and all sorts of other stories. But these kids would race down the mountain on these go-karts, homemade wooden go-karts, made like tires made of like tire parts that had come off 16-wheelers. And it's incredibly dangerous road. It's like you've probably seen like the world's dangerous roads. It's like that. And like cliffs, going down a couple hundred feet,
No guardrails.
No guardrails, right. No yellow lines, anything. No lights at night. And so these kids were just nasty. I mean, real like down and dirty heroes. And so he was telling me stories, and then I researched a little bit, found out that they were real, and then 7 years of my life went by, and I was like, just nothing. I was working on other stuff, and a friend came to me and said, we've got some money for a documentary. Do you have any ideas? And I said, there's this idea that I had like 7 years ago. And so they gave me the money to go down there to find out if it was true first. And so I went down there just kind of scavenging, no cameras. I went down there looking for these kids. And it took me like 2 months to find these kids. They're like ghosts of the mountains up there. Right. It was amazing. So then I came back and we did Kickstarter. We raised more funds. It was like $100,000 or something like that. And I took down a camera guy with me, a guy named Peter Mihalovich, who I knew he's like the best cameraman. He's like the type of guy that you can be like, go sit in that lake for 2 days and like shoot this frog, and he's like, got it. Like, he's just down and dirty. And so,
squared away.
Yeah, great cameraman to have. And so we went down there, and then that's when things got bad. We just weren't being as safe as we thought we had, or we didn't know that we had to be. So we were the sort of highlight of that first trip. We ended up going down. He went down with me 3 more times. I went down 7 times total over the course of 5 years, showing these kids sort of growing up. And one of the kids gets kidnapped, and there's other stuff. You'll have to watch the movie.
I will,
as they say.
I literally found out about that one today.
Yeah, so that was sort of the highlight of that first trip, if you can call it that, was we were filming a group of truckers right outside this town called Huánuco, and there's like a little truck depot where they go from the Amazon basin carrying like wood or whatever it is, all the way up 16,000 feet up to the Andes Mountains, and then back down towards Lima. These, and a lot of them die on these things. It's not a nice 5 miles an hour going up the hill. So we were interviewing them, and we'd been stopped by police a couple times because we were in a red zone, and they were like, what are you doing here and stuff like that. And we got stopped by police this one day, and they said, let's see your papers, and we knew to carry our passports, and permission that we had, could be in there from the U.S. Embassy. And so showed them the papers, and they went, something's not right here with these papers. And Pete didn't speak Spanish, but I did, and I was like, what's wrong with it? And he was like, oh no, we got to go back to the office because this is not the right numbers here that you have in your thing. And so it's like, shit, okay, fine. So like we had to literally just stop filming right then, and they like, we were way out, and so I was guessing the police station was like at least like a 30-minute drive in. So we get into the truck, and we're like a mile down the road, and they just go, pull their shirts off.
Wow.
They were not police.
Yeah.
Like literally pulling stickers off the side of the cars. And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And
this is how it ends.
Yeah, and I got freaked, and I didn't know what was going, and then I would speak to them, and they didn't say anything. They were just like telling us to shut up. They took us to this like kind of abandoned church, and kind of made us sit down there, and took everything from us, like shoes, socks, left us with our pants and our shirts, sunglasses, audio, all our filming equipment, passports, everything.
Wow.
That was really like, that was sort of, it freaked me out because I'd gone through so many crazy things in that geo, and then here I was sitting with my cameraman, like,
all it takes is one slip.
Like that was it. And and Pete and I were like, this is like, I remember we had that conversation. It's a tough thing for me to talk about now because Pete and I used to be really good friends, and we don't really talk anymore because we kind of went through a situation that is like, it was just too much. Like they kept us there for 24 hours, and we had these talks like in English because they didn't speak any English, and and we had these talks like, look, if I don't make it out or if something happens, tell my mom this. And I mean, there was some like serious heavy stuff that we were talking about. And one of the guys, so they like all of them left except for 2 guys, and they said we're coming back here in 4 hours. Don't think about leaving, or else we're going to hunt you down and we're going to kill you.
What did they want?
Just their shit.
Yeah. Okay.
They weren't organized enough.
Right.
Like one thing I did know was that there's sort of subsections of these trafficking groups, and you can really tell the ones that have their shit together and ones that don't. Just from how they talk to each other and the body language and things I'd learned, they were kind of like, okay, what should we do? Stuff like that.
We've got them now. What do we do with them?
Yeah, exactly.
We have shoes and camera equipment.
I think they just saw we had this expensive stuff, but they weren't organized enough to like ransom. They didn't have the technology on them. I didn't see any like sat phones or anything like that. So,
but I can imagine.
And so in that case, I thought this is even worse because they can just get rid of us and it's easy and done and they're gone. And so so these guys left, and I told Pete, I was like, we can't stick around here. It was like 2 a.m. Ish. I don't know exactly, but we ended up sneaking out, and for some idiotic reason they didn't blindfold us or anything like that. And so on the way in, I had seen, and I was obviously keeping track of, they always tell you like know where you're going so that you can get back out. So there were like landmarks and trying to memorize like stuff, and then also just knowing like what's in the woods there too, like what to be careful of, and because we weren't obviously going to be on the road. And so we ended up going in the woods, and we got lucky because maybe a quarter mile kind of towards this like perpendicular road that I knew we had like kind of turned into, we kind of gone off diagonally, was this house and a woman there, and it must have been nuts for her, 3 a.m, waking up with 2 Americans without shoes on going, we need help. And I could see it in her eyes, like she was like, what is going on
here? And lucky you were able to even communicate with her.
And she was like, so then it gets crazier because the cops come and they get us out of there like immediately. Like they don't show up and they're like, what happened? They're like, get in, get out. And we don't talk for like an hour and a half. They take us back into Wanako, and we get to the hotel and we're in the lobby, and they're like asking me questions, and Pete's can't talk with them. They don't speak English. So they take down all our information, and they're like, you should probably go back to Lima for a little bit, get out of Wanako, because they probably know that this is the closest town and they might come look for you, which we ended up doing. We had to come back anyways because we had nothing. So, but at the end of that, the cop goes, let's head over to the ATM now. Wow. And I was like, are you fucking shaking me down right now? And he's like, you don't have any other cards on you? And these are rural cops.
Dumb.
And he's asking me, he's like, you don't have another ATM card in your luggage or anything? I'm like, no, dude, they took literally everything. And he's like, you don't keep any extra cash. He was like, wanted to be paid. And I was like, I just got literally, it was about 27 hours, and then I got shut down by the cops. I was like, I was like, I gotta get out of here. It left such a bad taste in my mouth. Yeah. We didn't end up going back down there for another year after that.
Well, that to sort of down within a year is pretty amazing in itself without SEAL Team 6 running tight security for you.
Right. Well, we did get security after that. So there was an ex-congressman that we had interviewed. I ended up speaking with him by email again, and I said, hey, this happened, and do you have any security detail that you can suggest? He's like, oh, actually, there's a guy that's retired and will help me, ex-Army and stuff like that. And he ended up coming on and going down there with us, and then I brought a different cameraman down, and then Pete got kind of spooked again on another time because there was a time, it was like late at night, and if you heard like certain tires coming up the road, because you could hear them from, you heard armored trucks, and you knew all armored trucks were the Shining Path, Sendero Luminoso, and it was just like, if you heard that, it was like, get low, and it just freaked him out one night, and he was like, Quincy, I can't do this.
A little PTSD.
Yeah, and he had a girlfriend, and they were thinking about having a baby, and he was like, he's like, I would love to, but
that's you know, that you used to hear those stories about old school journalists getting into war zones and crazy. You
it still happens
anymore.
It happens all the time. There's there's a good friend of mine, Michael Heineman, who has done some killer documentaries, but that kind of is what he specializes in. He goes into these like just nasty zones, and it happens all the time. You just don't. You know, all these reporters that are in Syria, because previously there weren't a lot of people that knew how to handle cameras, and so it was like a handful of guys that went into these dangerous. Now everybody's got, you know, you can shoot on an iPhone, and so it's easy to conceal. It's easy, you know, a lot more people are doing it, so it's, you don't hear it as much because I think it's more sort of spread out. Right. But you know, there's still those places that are still around, and you know, it's dangerous.
I bet you those guys.
It's dangerous out there.
Have a love for it, just, you know, like they can't, like guys who I saw you interviewed Sebastian Junger, whose books, his books blow my mind, you know, and I've interviewed a couple. One of my good friends is a Force Recon guy, and when he was wounded in Fallujah, and then went right back, and he said it was the best time of my life. I think those guys all just get addicted to
and see, I wasn't even close to that. They were you know, my stories are tame compared to, you know, some. I have a great friend, Christian Twyman down here, who grew up with me. He was a childhood friend. And he went into the Army Rangers, and he was always the kid that like always got on the fight on the soccer field. Like he was just so scrappy all the time. Like, and his older brother played with him, and every single time they were on the soccer field together, they were always fist fighting, like just constantly. And everybody always knew like he's gonna get into the army or something. He just had that like gung ho, you know, wanted to fight, killer mentality, totally. And so he went into Army Rangers. He did 5 tours. There were like 2 in Afghanistan, 3 in Iraq. Front line, I mean, nasty stuff, lost friends. He's just kind of that mentality, went through this crazy stuff, came back to Atlanta, was out with a friend of his at a nightclub and got shot.
Wow, see, exactly, right, you know?
Yeah, got shot in the side, and like, you know, he was, what do you call it, I'm blanking on the word, bystander. But got shot there. It's funny how he tells the story. He's like, so, you know, I'm down in the dirt in Afghanistan, you know. Then I'm in Atlanta and I got these nice shirts on, and, you know, I'm drinking and girls around, and
all of a sudden, bang.
Yeah, exactly. But it's good, you know. I gotta say that the situational awareness thing, I feel like especially, you know, I think men and women, I feel like it should be like a course taught in It's helped me in so many other ways other than like filmmaking. It's just made me more aware of like just things to watch out for in life. And I feel like, and if nothing happens to you, that's the point, you know.
I was a corrections officer for 19 years.
So you know, so body language,
things that drive my wife nuts. So we go into a restaurant. I normally sit with my back to the wall so I can see the entrance. I don't even know if she knows that or not, but I do. And I'm constantly just watching people. And she's always like, hey, I'm here, look at me. And it's just a habit you got into when you sat in a room full of criminals and you were just constantly eyeballing everybody in the room and searching out threats. It's just, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's something that, it's so weird being down here. So you're walking home from the bar at night and people are not paying attention.
I know.
And you can walk right up on them. And it's weird because I'll do that. I'll just walk right up on somebody and just walk right by them. They don't even notice you're there, you know?
Well, you know what's crazy is that it's funny that you bring that exact point up, because 2 nights ago when I was with some friends, and it was like 2 in the morning or something, I come back and I was a little buzzed and stuff, and I was walking down the street and it was so quiet that it was like, you know, just like kind of looking around, making sure, you know, you'd hear something. And if you don't look around, that feeds this paranoia in you, like, look around. You know, just take a glance. What's it gonna hurt? You know, just like look around, you know. But I
stopped a couple times last night just to leave my cell phone, you know, and I would just look around, see it, and then I would just go right back to what I was doing, you know.
Yeah, it's crazy. It is crazy. The you know, Sebastian Junger has a whole book / documentary coming out about PTSD. I spoke with him actually a few weeks ago about it. He and I stay in touch a lot because of the film festival world and programming and stuff like that. But he's working on an
interesting guy, man.
He is working on one of the most fascinating subjects. Well, he's working on PTSD, which is in and of itself this sort of like ethereal thing people can't really get a hold of, and because there's different types of it.
And it's controversial among people in the military.
Very much so. Yeah, and it's hard to talk about in a way that doesn't offend people sometimes, So anyways, but I think he has the respect to do that, and he's proven himself, and he suffers from it himself. But he started the whole thing because when he came back from Korengal, he was heavily affected by it, massively, and shakes and stuff like that. And he went to Johns Hopkins, and they did studies on him, and he did it kind of as, he's a filmmaker too, so he wanted to film it, and the process of being treated for it.
Right.
But a friend of his said, who you should go talk to are these Native American elders. And he's like, why? And the guy was like, just go talk to, I know some of these guys in tribes, go talk with them. And so we went out and talked to them about PTSD, and how the Native Americans would handle it, and it sort of varied slightly from tribe to tribe. But when they would come back from war, because these Indians would go off and fight and then come back, that they would encircle them and not do anything until they knew that these guys were okay. It's not like our society now where it's like, go to this doctor and you're in a room and
here's some pills.
Yeah, exactly. So we started studying the way that Native Americans, and the success rate of PTSD was like 99.9% with Native American warriors. Like, you would read these old journals, and people that would study that back then.
Yeah.
And so he's working on this book now about PTSD from the perspective. I mean, these Indians were doing this for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. We're brand new to this game, you know, in the scope of, the story, the human story. So he's coming out with a book now about sort of PTSD, and it's just fascinating.
I'm looking forward to that one. I read both of his books on a trip to Iceland once, and just fascinating. I have a friend, I've got a bunch of friends who were, and it's mostly through this podcast that I meet these guys that are kind of tip of the spear guys.
Yeah.
And they have it's funny because then I have other friends who are in different aspects of the military, and they came back and they have a hard time with fireworks and stuff like that. The tip of the spear guys don't have it as much. And a friend of mine explained it in his theory was that when we were there, we were going out looking for trouble. We were hunting. We were predators. We knew what was coming. These guys were sitting there in the base. They were having shit thrown at them. They didn't know when it was coming. Or these guys were out on patrols. They didn't know. We were going out looking for trouble. And he
very different mentality.
That's a different mentality. Why a lot of those guys aren't affected, where a lot of the frontline troops who weren't that way.
Yeah, what's interesting too is Christian Twyman, who he's now he still works with the Army, and he trains guys now. He's got a kid, and it sort of changed for him after that. But he never had any inkling of PTSD. But that may have been something that he was born with too. In terms of this distancing or not processing. They sometimes say the smarter, and this gets into dangerous territory again about offending.
Absolutely.
But the idea of emotional capacity and intelligence feeding into PTSD and the different forms of it. I talked to Sebastian about it for a long time, and there's just so many levels of it. I don't know. Anyways, I don't know how we got off on that track. But
it's
fascinating.
That stuff really fascinates me, and starting to deal with more tactical guys now. All that stuff's very interesting to me, and I look forward to reading that book for sure. Anything he writes, I'll read. So. So you were just down in the Dominican, right?
So I was in Costa Rica. So we have the Bumfardo story, right?
So Bumfardo was the fire chief down here. He was
the fire chief. Yeah, he was the fire chief for many, many years down here. Very sort of outgoing, social guy. He was sort of an icon because he only wore red. He drove around in a key lime Cadillac with a big silver eagle emblem on the front. He was a show-off.
Well, when you talk about Bumfardo, you lump him in with guys like Hunter S. Thompson and Jimmy Buffett and Captain
100%.
Tony, Mel Fisher. He
was a character.
Legends.
100%. And he got into a lot of trouble. He was connected with a lot of. The story that everybody knew is not the story that we found out. The story that everybody knew was that He was a fire chief. He was indicted for smuggling cocaine and marijuana, and he was sentenced to 31 years. A couple of weeks before his sentencing day, he disappears and literally has never been seen since.
Right.
He's like the South Florida Jimmy Hoffa kind of thing. So that was anything anybody ever knew, and there were theories about. One of my favorite stories is that the firemen at the fire station were concerned that he was going to rat them out, and so they got together $25,000 in cash, gave it to him, said, "Go up to Miami. There's a guy up there that's going to get you down to Costa Rica, and you start a whole new life." And he took the money up to this guy in Miami, and the guy shot him. He was delivering his own hit money.
Wow.
And that story,
that's a hell of a story.
And that story for a long time was the story.
Yeah.
And then it morphed into other things, and then people had said he was in Costa Rica, and all these crazy things. He was hiding in Spain and Mexico. It was all over the place. Well, 6 years ago, because of my work with Nat Geo, I knew how to fill out a FOIA request. So we filled out a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request for all of the FBI files, which I thought there were going to be like 30 or 40. They ended up being 905 pages, and it detailed a 34-year manhunt to find this guy between the FDLE, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the DEA, the CIA, the FBI, the NCIC, you name it, the Legat of Panama,
Alphabet soup.
Everybody, yeah.
Everybody was on it.
Yeah, the GIADF before GIADF, right? It was like the interagency thing. So they had, it was an incredible story of just kind of how they looked for this guy and never found him. And then it had to do with extradition laws. He kind of narrowly escaped. They were going to literally just fly a plane down there and grab him out of Costa Rica and take him. They knew where he was.
So they knew he was down there.
They knew where he was for a while.
Yeah.
And then the governments flipped. There was a new president that came in. The new president came in and hated the United States and said, if you fly a single fucking plane down here, it's going to be a pure nightmare for you. And so the FBI stopped extraditing people. That's when a whole handful of famous people went down to famous criminals went down to Costa Rica. But Bumfardo escaped by the skin of his teeth. But it's really interesting. I mean, you see the FBI literally going crazy, and then them setting up sting operations. And I mean, it goes on and on. And so I got these, and I just went, oh man, what a fucking story here! Like, what a documentary.
Right.
So I started working on Billy Corbin, who did Cocaine Cowboys.
Yeah.
Is a great friend of mine.
Great movie,
man. He's a great guy. His producing partner, Alfred Spellman, and I got together, and we went to Spike and FX, the TV stations. And we said, look, we got this great, because they had an in there, and they thought it would fit. We sat down with them, and they kind of were just lowballing us in terms of budget. And so Alfred was like, why don't we go back and sort of rewrite this whole thing, like a different idea, and go to Netflix or something. So I couldn't really get this. It was for some reason I had all these other projects and I couldn't get to the screenwriting. And so I was like, why don't I do a podcast? And I was like, this will be a good excuse to write out a script, get the story done, figure it out, spend time concentrating on it.
Like a Dan Carlin style.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it was very kind of just jump right into it. And we looked through, all these FBI files. We talked with ex-agents. We flew down to Costa Rica to look for, where he was down there, which was a great trip because we didn't find out things, but it closed all these doors. And that's what ended up leading us to figure out what actually ended up happening with him in the end.
So did he live out his life down there?
He did. He was 56 when he got indicted.
Okay.
So, and he was looking at 31 years. So that's a life sentence, basically. So no wonder he escaped, and he had a connection down there. And again, it's a 4.5 hour podcast, right. seven parts, 4.5 hours, and so it's a long story. You
can listen to it.
But yeah, he was in Costa Rica, and because he went down there, he was a very social character for 56 years of his life. He went down there and basically had to just shut down everything. He lived in a small shack on the beach in a place called Karate, which is a tiny, tiny town, 200 people, outside of a bigger town called Puerto Jimenez, west side of Costa Rica. And he had to shut down and not talk with anybody. And it drove him crazy, so much so that he ended up dying in '99 of dementia, which I didn't even know you could die of dementia. Right. But you can apparently die of dementia because it starts to affect, you start to literally go crazy, and it becomes a chemical imbalance. It starts to affect your nervous system, and apparently you end up suffocating yourself because it affects your central nervous system.
That's got to be, and the
which can be multiple things,
right?
But it can also be. I talked to the psychiatrist during this podcast, and I said, "Is it possible that like it's basically like?" He said that what Bum didn't realize was that self-imposing in exile is sometimes worse than prison, because prison you can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
You're stuck there. Whereas self-exile is like you have to convince yourself not to go into town, convince people to shut down that life, to not talk with your wife, which you had to leave. That it can almost be worse than jail, and maybe he didn't realize that, and that led to some mental psychosis.
It makes sense, because most people can't do that. They can't live the lifestyle. They Henry Hill themselves. They go out and they try to live that lifestyle for a while. Then they start making
a way to put it
back to that same scam that they were running in wherever they were from.
Yeah,
get some out of here.
Yeah. So it was an interesting thing, and with there are a couple more details that we're looking into right now. We want to try to find a grave. So we're trying to figure out where his body would have been buried, and I've got some, hardcore researchers on that right now.
David told me, he said that when he said to get a hold of you, he said, we were just down there looking for Bum Fardo. I go, what's he, 112 years old? What do you mean you're still looking for him?
Yeah, he would have been 100 this year.
You were on the search for his story, not him himself.
Funny, at one point we're interviewing an 85-year-old, and as the 85-year-old's talking, it suddenly hit me, this dude's a fucking generation before Bum Fardo.
Right.
That's how old 100 years old is. 85 is a generation before 100 years old.
I live in this condo community that is filled with people. I'm 45, and we're the youngest people in the community by 20 years.
Right.
And there's a man and a wife who live in our unit, and the man is 103 and the wife is 100. And I started to think about that, 1919, they saw the world wars, and they saw all this shit, and they saw the man go to the moon, and the birth of aviation.
Insane.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
100 years, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. It really hit me during that interview. I went, this guy, of course this guy would know Bum Fardo.
Right.
It was odd to sort of hit me like, how old is 100? 100 is really old.
Yeah.
We think 85 is old. 100 is really old.
if you're making it to 85, you're doing something right. If you make it to 100, the Bum Fardo story has always been one of those. He wasn't a Robin Hood, obviously, but it was just one of these characters that made this island why it's so special. People come down here for the party, and then I think if they figure out the history, and if they're obsessed with the history, and they get into it, they want to keep coming down. Like I'm down here by myself. Just because I love the island.
Well,
I love the stories.
Someone once said that if you're into stories, Key West is like the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
It's like the gold mine of stories. I mean, that's why Hemingway was down here in Tennessee Williams, Truman Capote. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And if they didn't live here, Hunter S. Thompson, if they didn't live, Shel Silverstein, some of the great minds of literature. And if they didn't live down here, a lot of them visited. And we've had a lot of filmmakers, we've had everybody from Danny DeVito's been down here, Jane Hackman, Michael Keaton, Christian Slater. Those are newer ones. But James Cameron was here. We've had Scorsese's visit. I mean, it brings people here because the stories, you can't help it.
No, yeah.
I read in the water.
I think it was called US 1, The Movable Feast of Key West.
Yes, right.
It just talked about I think it was like the late 70s, early 80s when everyone was down here, and Tom Cochran was running the chart room, and all these characters and movie stars and artists that were down here. It's an incredible place for stories.
But it almost generates stories too. Like the stories don't stop. We were talking about this happened a couple weeks ago or something, or maybe a couple months ago. There was a group of guys out of Miami, young, maybe 20, 21, something like that. Up to no good, kind of stuff, coming down, and they came down to Big Pine Key, and they stole key deer.
I saw that. They had them in the trunk of their car, right?
Yeah, I love that story. And I just thought, I want to make a short film about that, where I was thinking it would be so great to because there were three of them, right? So two of them are up front, and there's a dude in the back. And that guy's got to sit with the key deer.
Right.
And I just had this idea of like, the key deer kind of warms up to him and like licks him, and he's like, dude, like, stop, man, I'm not gonna like stop, and like keeps licking him. Then he like has a change of heart,
right,
to the point where he like opens up the door and he's like, run.
That's like a Carl Hyacin book,
exactly,
right there,
like
right?
saving the key deer,
right? Yeah.
Like saving his friend, right. Like I just thought, what a great kind of what a crazy story. And I mean, it's like every week. There's a guy that peed on an ATM machine and got electrocuted a couple weeks ago. I just thought, what's
that's
like
cosmic karma?
Yeah,
right
I mean,
there.
just like, who are these? It almost generates. It's like a power plant of stories down here. I think
his name's blanking on me now. The guy who wrote Cocaine Cowboys,
Billy Corbin. Yeah,
he explained his movies as typical Carl Hyacin Florida fuckery works.
Yeah, Florida fuckery.
That is the best explanation. I fell in love with Carl Hyacin's works because there's a smidgen of truth to everything he writes.
Right,
it's all stories out of the Miami Herald.
Yeah.
That, and he kind of bases a lot of the criminals on and.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, it's a gold mine down here, and it just never ends. There's always something. I mean, next week it'll be something down here. You just got to read the crime report.
Right.
Yeah, I love he said. I actually worked on. I don't know whatever happened to that. He was working on a TV show. I should ask him actually. I don't know what happened to that. We were working on a TV show that I helped him. I was writing consultant with him, called Sunny Place for Shady People.
Yeah, that's
he was working on the guy from Scarface, Stephen Bauer, was narrating. And it's basically like a Florida Man's TV series.
Right,
like just
Florida Man.
One crazy story to the next. There's a story too. One of my favorite stories is the guy that was fucking an alligator, and they took the alligator away, and he sued them and got the alligator back from the state. Some dude out in the Everglades.
That's dedication.
And I just thought, that scene, because I think visually, it's like meet them outside the zoo or something, and he's like opens up his arm and in slow motion the alligator like makes his way back. Like, how's that? Who's the sheriff officer that has to like unhook the leash or like what do they do?
He's like, all yours.
We'll drop him back off at your house with like tape around
alligator. Oh my god.
Yeah, knowing what they're gonna do, knowing what he's gonna do to that alligator.
Florida Man's the best, and I forward stories to my son and my wife every time you see those articles.
Yeah, that's great. How old's your son?
He's 14.
Okay, I've got a 6-year-old daughter now.
So you're in the mix.
I'm in the mix.
It's gonna be it'll be fast. I remember 6 to 14 went by super quick.
Yeah.
She'll go to Key West schools here and everything. Very cool.
Yeah, I went away. I got lucky down here. I went off to prep school for high school, so I did it up through middle. I grew up down here and went up through middle school. And I have a whole another part of my life that I'm not sure that you've heard, but my dad was a big smuggler down here.
No shit.
He wrote a book about it. There are a couple books written about his operation. He wrote one called Sex, Salvage, and Secrets. It's sort of my shameless plug for him.
I'm gonna ask you after because I'm gonna look these books up.
Yeah, he was one of the top-ranked divers in the Army during Vietnam, and he became an experimental diver with the Navy after that in the Bahamas. And he was making, they were testing these young kids. They were like 21 and making like $150,000 a year with no expenses in Nassau, Bahamas.
Sure, right.
And they were doing things
like the draggers and stuff.
Oh no, they were doing deep sea diving on LSD. They were doing they were testing the human brain. There's a great story of where I don't think this is Bahamas. I think they were in the Potomac River. And there's a great story where they gave them these sort of big blow hoses and go down, and there's supposed to be a chest down there, and they, learning how to get through the mud and recover like something down in the mud. And they would, get the hose, and then all the mud would be up around. And they kink the hose to the blower, and all the mud would just suck them in. They're in these heavy suits, and they'd literally just be stuck underneath there with the hose, and they talk down with them and say, we're working on this, and we're trying to make sure, and then they'd kink the communication, and they just listen in, and they'd be breathing. These were young kids down there, and then they'd kink the oxygen, and they just wait to hear you scream. I mean, this was a different time where there wasn't human rights, PETA, stuff that they could do this undercover, and so he went on to do this, and he was making so much money. But he had all this money in the Bahamas, and they got hooked up with the son of the governor of South Carolina, and the guy's like, hey, you guys like flying planes? And they literally that's how it went. And there was a group of there's another book called Jackpot that another guy wrote that was part of this operation.
Okay.
And these two books, Sex, Salvage, and Secrets, My Dad's and Jackpot, kind of intertwine in different ways.
I'm going to message you to get the names.
Yeah, but they started running for a while, and I had no idea when I was young. And then my dad ended up getting busted when I was 5, and he got lucky, like universe miracle lucky, because he was looking at, I think it was like 15 years or something. And he was just devastated. I don't remember any of this, but he, from what he tells me, he was looking at quite a few years and was up in front of a judge. And the judge was like, during the sentencing, there's sort of a plea, right, that your defense attorney can say, like, this is an upright citizen, and before this, and he said something about his military and being in the army and stuff like that, and being in Vietnam. And he just happened to have a judge who lost a son in Vietnam, and was part of kind of a unit that was in the same general area that my dad was in. And the judge got choked up and was only sentenced him to 2 years. I mean, talk about the universe.
Charmed, yeah.
Jesus. And he tells that story. It's like I get goosebumps just thinking about it.
Wow.
But so he went away for a couple of years. I do remember he went to this kind of country club because he was so high ranking in the army. They put him in a nice little place out in Texas, and I remember going there with my mom, sort of, and being thinking it was normal too. I thought all the kids would be what state's your dad in?
Where's your dad at?
Yeah.
And you guys were living in Key West when all this happened?
Yeah. They were flying into
That's
here
a Key West story right there.
Yeah, it was a different time too, and a lot of my friends too, like Michael Malgrath, who's now a cop, his dad was a massive smuggler down here, and it was just kind of the time down here at that was kind of the normal thing,
Yeah.
So, but read the Sex, Salvage, and Secrets.
I'm on it.
It's on Amazon too. It's a great little.
I'll have to check that out.
Great little thing. But I come from that, and I think there's a little bit of genetic something in me too, that adventure. Now that I have a daughter, things have changed, but
it will change. That's
no more narco trafficking, but Bumpardo I can handle.
There's not much risk there, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's it will change, and it calms you down a little bit, and you start thinking about the bigger world outside your own body.
Yeah.
There's a death to some part of your masculinity, but there's a rebirth of something else. So.
Yeah, it takes on a different form.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's been interesting too to see. So my dad, just as a sort of side thing that I found was really interesting, just as sort of a observer of humans. He went after jail. He went into the towboat business. That's why it's called Sex, Salvage, and Secrets. He went to marine salvaging,
which it was a scam in itself down here. Yeah,
big time. And he had the last wrecker's license, and all sorts of great stories about saving people on the reef and storms and all this stuff. I mean, he had a whole adventurous life after that smuggling thing. But he sold the business. He turned 60 years old, and he sold the business. And he went nuts, literally nuts, threatened my stepmother. He was going to shoot her, was going to burn down the house, went crazy. Because after 60 years of being captain, he didn't have anything. He had no identity.
Right.
And so he sold the business, and someone said to him, man, you're on a downward spiral here. And he was drinking cocaine, just nasty. And everybody was concerned for him. At 60 years old, too, you can't get into that shit. 24 or 5, but 60, your heart's not up for it. So he started taking pen to paper, and he started writing the book. And then just right around that same time, we were talking about having a kid, but now seeing my dad with my daughter, it's saved his life in a way. He has this whole new role as captain again.
Yeah,
as the captain granddad,
impart some wisdom on his granddaughter.
Yeah, I tell him to leave some stories out.
Yeah.
A lot of the wisdom he has is not necessarily legal wisdom.
Knowing the bloodline, she'll probably be interested in it at some point.
Yeah.
Your wife a conch too, or?
No, so she's a whole other. She's from Lithuania originally. Grew up in England. She's a graphic designer. She's the smart cookie of the bunch, you know.
Oh, yeah, I'm married to one of those too.
Yeah, I married up.
Yeah.
And, but she's artistic. It's been great. We teamed up because I was looking for someone to do a poster for a movie that I was doing, and someone recommended her, and that's how we kind of ended up meeting.
Did she do the poster for Swingers Anonymous?
She's done all my posters.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a really cool. That's a really good.
Yeah.
Cool
She did that one. She did. Yeah, all of them. She did Little Fireman. She's done. Yeah, Swingers Anonymous. That was a whole nother story, but. Yeah, it's been sort of charmed. I'm 39 right now, and I think, Jesus, like it's been a good run, you know, so far. I know. I feel like that too. I feel like I'm kind of getting into the swing of figuring out my pacing too, you know, because it was a little too wild.
I'm 45 now, and I feel like things are finally getting figured out. Like, I know the way. I've done this before.
Right.
You know, once you was a Musashi. One of my favorite Musashi quotes was, "Once you find the path, you can see the path broadly and everything. You know, you just
that's great.
You know how to do things. You know, it just takes practice, discipline." And
I find that reaction is a big part of growing up. You know, how you react to things. You know, I remember sort of younger and being like, you react heavily, and on the scale of 1 to 10, it's 10.
Yes.
You know, and as you kind of come down, and that means good and bad things. And so when something bad happens in your life, and you're like, this is it, and I should just go, and you know, I mean, and then, you know, getting towards 40 now, you start to go, okay, I don't need to, you know, bad shit's gonna happen again. I don't need to react, you know. I know where the level's at, you know what I mean, and that helps, I think.
And you enjoy the times like these when you're down in paradise and you can relax, and you enjoy them for what they are and for how long they'll last. And then when something bad happens, you realize to yourself that this too will go away, and you'll have more good times.
Hey, we're sitting at a rum bar in Key West sharing stories, separate drink.
Someone asked me, he was like, it was my the guy I take jiu-jitsu from. He said, so what are you doing when you're down there? I said, well, I hang out and go to all my favorite joints down there, but I got 4 podcasts scheduled. And he goes, you can't even stop working when you're on vacation. I said, if you're going to call this work, to sit down and listen to people tell stories, you know, and have conversations, I mean, I guess it's work. I mean, I get paid a little bit, but it's not exactly, you know, pulling crab traps on the Bering Sea or something.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Well, welcome down, man. Welcome to the epicenter of stories.
It's we first came down here in 2009, 9 or 8, and the night we landed, they broke a record for cold. So I was like, what the fuck? You know, I was coming from Cleveland in January, and I land in Key West, and it's 40 degrees. And people are flipping their lids.
Oh, yeah. Iguanas falling from the trees,
And then the next day got up to 70, and I was like, all right. And,
that's freezing for us.
We've been coming back ever since.
Turn the heater on.
My wife and I got engaged at Mallory Square, and funny story, we were down for sunset celebration, and my best man had gone into our hotel room. I left the door open. He got in, got the ring, and met us down there, and he slipped me the ring. And at the time, I was still a pro Highland Games athlete. I weighed well over 300 pounds. My wife was always afraid I was going to die. My girlfriend at the time. And so we're at Mallory Square, and I give her a hug, and I go down on one knee, and she's a nurse, so she automatically thinks I'm having a heart attack. She's like, oh my God, are you okay? What's wrong? And I basically had to say, shut up.
Back up. Take a step back.
She thought I was dying. So I proposed to her, but that's her thing. And
that's great.
I had told her brother, he said, what if she says no? I said, I'm going to throw her right in the fucking ocean. She's going right in.
Yeah, that's great, man.
So
what a great story.
We're linked to Key West for sure.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah. So what's up next for you? What's on the horizon?
So I'm working on a bigger documentary right now. It's been in the works for a long time. I'm working with Sebastian Younger on this a little bit. He's been helping me out in a lot of different just contacts and stuff like that. But I'm doing a sort of all-encompassing, massive documentary on charity.
Okay.
So it looks at everything from the Red Cross debacle in Haiti, of like, you know, sort of what they call the corporate charities, right? These multi-billion, you know, Goodwill, so it's, you know, the names on the block.
Yeah.
All the way from those and, you know, the good and bad and ugly of that, down to the mentality of charity, and how different cultures have it right, others have it wrong. Americans have a very kind of warped view of charity, and just kind of giving and what's expected back, and how we basically, the documentary is that says that we need to completely revamp how we look at charity right now. That there's certain ways that have been proven to do well, and then I also tell people, look, if you got $5, here's who to, you know, go to.
That's a real good thing.
I teamed up with there are a couple different websites you can Google these, but there's a couple different charity ranking things. So if you do have, you know, $100 that you want to give to something like the Amazon, you know, rainforest is burning right now, and some people were asking me the other day about who to give to, and there's like the Amazon Watch is a great one, but you can look at these charity aid, you know, websites, and they rank them. So how much money goes to overhead? So of like $1, how many cents goes to the person you're trying to help, or animal, or whatever it is that the charity does. So the documentary kind of goes into that, and it goes a little undercover, and we've got some pretty hard-hitting interviews with people who, you know, it's a little bit of an expose on some of these elitist charities, and it's not going to be welcomed by some people, but we're working on sort of the right way to do that, and getting the right people behind us, like a Netflix, so that we don't have to worry so much about lawsuits and stuff.
We do a charity event every year, and for years we were giving it to one charity, and I obviously won't say who it was.
Yeah.
But we wanted to know, their thing was that they gave a scholarship. The money went to a scholarship.
Right.
So we contacted them because we wanted to know, A, previous winners.
Right.
How someone would apply for this scholarship. It's a military scholarship.
Sure.
And how much money was, and they wouldn't answer any of the questions.
Yeah.
So we ended up finding
Right.
the Navy SEAL Foundation, and they were able to answer all our questions, and 96% of the dollar goes to the actual charity, because it's run by the wives of Navy SEALs.
Right.
And we said, fine, that's great, you know, and
and it just gets really shady up in that corporate charity, as they call it. I mean, Goodwill has been busted. I mean, there's all sorts of money laundering things, and where they hide money in their budget lines. But I think it's a really, you know, it hit me because as I was working down in Peru, I noticed that there were kind of three levels. There was corporate charity, there's sort of independent, like independent films, independent charities, and then there's individual-based charity, right? Like people that, you know, that we do it for the wrong reason. Like, you know, we do it for Facebook likes or something like that. You know, like I met this woman who, not to like, you know, rip on her, but she would like take pencils and stuff down to kids, and thought she was making, you know, a world of difference, and ended up making these kids' lives harder because she didn't bring sharpeners, you know, stuff like, I mean, and the documentary is really about, it also examines, I followed a guy around who had a sort of existential view on charity, which is when does your moral obligation stop? And that was a very important question for us to look at, because like, let's say that you bring a kid out of poverty, right? You help them get to that next level. Well, at that next level, there are more issues there. Like, so like, let's say that you send them away to college. Well, are you paying for their dormitory too? Are you paying for food there? Because the food's going to be more expensive than if they're living at home. Are you then paying for transportation? Then once they graduate that, are you then paying for that, you know, 6 months where they're trying to find a job? And then, you know, but what's the moral obligation to follow through? Because every time that we help somebody, there are also consequences to charity. I mean, you read this from, you know, right, the time, like, they give out these shoes. They like dropped all these Nike shoes. I think it was in Santiago, Chile or something. Some guy went down there, mega wealthy, gave all these shoes to kids, and these kids were killed for their shoes. And so there's consequences to, like, well, once you help out someone, what are the next steps? You know, you change their life, and in terms of changing their life, what's the moral obligation to see that through? At what point do you leave them to let them go? And then how do you, charity should be about self-sufficiency, so it should be more based towards, like, how do you give them the tools to become their own charity giver in a sense? And that follows all the way from helping a kid out of poverty to helping animals to helping change policies and government and lobbying, which is kind of a form of charity in a way, and it is a charity. Like Greenpeace lobbies, so you give money to Greenpeace and they hire lobbyists to go in and and so you're. It's a fascinating world of charity, and nobody had ever done a really great documentary.
That's really interesting, just to think about it that way. Where does it end, and where does your obligations end, and when do you say enough's enough? Key West again is a place. So if you go to downtown Cleveland, you have people on the street panhandling constantly, cup in their hand, asking for money. A lot of times they're very aggressive. I don't give to any of them. And if you talk to me wrong, I'm going to talk to you wrong back. Because I know what the deal is. Down here, they're on the street, they're doing things, they're playing guitars, they've got a dog with sunglasses. I had one guy, last time I was down here, sitting on the steps of a building, and he said, "Hey man, how about $5?" And I said, "What do you need $5 for?" He says, "I want to get high." I said, "Here's $10." I gave him the money and said, "At least you're being honest with me." It's a different world down here.
It's funny, it's weird too how, you want to try to stay moral about all this stuff, but when I was like I lived in Quito, Ecuador, and in Quito, it's nasty. The child poverty rate is insane. There are kids all over the streets. And at first when I moved down there, it was like, your heart's just broken and you're giving money away, and then 3 months down the line, you're sort of like, okay, not $1, but here's $0.25, and then another 6 months down the line, you're like, sorry, I don't have any money on me, and then 6 months down the line, you're like, get off my fucking car. And you're like, get the fuck away from. I mean, it changes. It's a human nature thing, and it sounds horrible, and you try to keep the heart open to that stuff, but it becomes very difficult when you see different sides of it, and and I think that this charity thing is not only a good film for just individuals to know about stuff, but I hope in the end that it changes our government's view of like, where's our money going, Well, just when you mentioned it that your next one was on charity, I was like, it doesn't. But then as you explain it, all those different nuances come into it. I'm like, this is a very nuanced issue. I never thought of it that way. So that should be fantastic. And there's millions and billions of dollars. This is a big business charity. Like, don't get it confused. The Red Cross. I mean, this is money. This is a for-profit business model with a lot of these big ones, And then you've got, and it's complicated too, because you have like it changes in leadership too. Like I knew Wounded Warrior went through a section there where they had this guy that was just a terrible leader of it, and they were not doing great things, and a lot of money was going where it shouldn't be going, and the programs that they were implementing were different and not productive, and I mean, and but then that changed with the next leader.
I was going to say, are they better now?
Yeah, they're great now.
Okay.
They've changed
all I've always heard they weren't good.
They got a new, I think it's a woman actually who's running it now. I don't take my word for that. I'm not sure, but yeah, they've got a new leader there that.
Well, that's good, because I never would have donated to them just because I had heard so many bad stories. And that it wasn't going where it was supposed to be going.
Well, and the other thing too that a lot of people don't know is that when you donate to a charity, you can specifically tell them what to do with that money. A lot of people think like, I give $1,000 to Red Cross and help them out, but you can actually give $1,000 to Red Cross and say help build sewer lines in Haiti. Like that can be part of it, and they have to do that legally.
Wouldn't that be great if you could do your taxes that way? Tell the government, I want this to go to fixing potholes and securing police on the streets or something.
Yeah, exactly. But you can do that with charity, and not many people know that. So educating them and saying, look, you have the option to tell them, like Wounded Warrior, you want rehabilitation programs to be what gets your money, like that's what you tell them in the letter, and they literally legally are bound to what you say, and like nobody knows that simple little thing. And so it is definitely like a tips and tricks, but it's a little bit expose. I don't know. We'll see. I think it was Sebastian Younger behind it too. He's got a great eye, and so I sent him some of it's a long. I've been working on it for 1.5 years already. I probably have another 2 years on it. I hate to say that, but I know I do.
Well,
so
you got nothing but time, right?
Yeah, I know.
That's fantastic. Well, man, This has been great. This is way more than I thought it was going to be, and I'm glad that David hooked us up.
Yeah, David's got some great stories too. You're going to have fun with him.
Yeah, I got him tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Yeah. Who else have you done? Or who did you get?
John Holster last night, and then Melvin Fisher, grandson.
Oh yeah? Awesome. Cool. I've never met him actually. I knew Mel.
Well, if you're going down to the chart room, he was down in the chart room last night. We had a few cocktails, and
excellent.
And I'm gonna get something to eat and head back down there again tonight. But,
Killer. Yeah, thanks for having me on this.
Yeah, it's been great. I'd love to do it again next time we're down. And
anytime.
Hopefully you can give us some more stories. I'm going to make sure I get a hold of those books because I'll be well read on them next time we come down.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, brother.
Killer.
This has been The Refined Savage. See ya.